Hey my friends, this is Daniel Alley, and today I want to talk with you about how you can craft the perfect voice. Believe it or not, I actually used to stutter and stammer, and I couldn't even look myself in the eye and say my name correctly because I was quite shy, but more importantly, it was because I didn't practice my voice. It wasn't until I decided to speak in public where I challenged myself to crafting the perfect voice. In this video, I'm going to share with you some tips that you can use to help you to craft your voice so you can speak up in your life. Before I get into this video, I wanted to let you know that all of us speak millions and millions of words, and so the importance of this should be magnetized in your life. A lot of times people don't think about increasing the pitch of their voice or how they sound, but the fact is that it's very, very important and it should be taken into consideration. If you want to learn how to speak up, then you want to listen very carefully with what I have to say. The first tip for crafting a perfect voice is situational. Whenever someone asks you a question, make sure you try to realize that you're not mumbling or stuttering or stammering or even afraid to answer them in a way you believe that the question should be answered. So regarding your situations, make sure you're able to speak up and enunciate and articulate what you're trying to say so that people can hear. If people are always asking you, "What did you say?" or "Can you repeat that again?" then maybe you might want to consider speaking up. This is a problem that I know people constantly have, but they don't realize that they need to speak up. Or maybe they do realize it, but they don't know how. The fact is that you've got to come from the gut and you've just got to speak up. You just got to say what you feel and feel what you say. And if you do so, then every situation you'll be able to get better because you'll be practicing your voice. What I'm really saying is that sometimes you might feel like you want to say something and you might not say it because you might be afraid of how people might perceive you. But the fact is that you don't know until you say it. Maybe it might help somebody. Maybe it might allow some change that might not have occurred unless you said it. So you also got to feel what you say. You also got to know that what you're saying is going to be understood. Right? You're not speaking to be a dummy. You're not speaking to be ignored. You're speaking to be understood. So speak up when the situation demands it. The second tip for crafting a perfect voice is to be interesting. And the best way you can do that is by practicing your inflection. You can go from high to low or low to high. So make sure you're able to practice your inflection so people can hear you with interest. There's a lot of people who speak in a monotone manner, and the fact is that it's quite boring. I really think that people should change the way they speak because if they do, they might be more interesting. If you're someone who uses a monotone voice, be sure to switch it up. Be sure to get in touch with your emotions so that it can come out from the high to low manner and so that you can be listened to with great interest. The third tip for crafting the perfect voice is to practice singing. For a lot of people, it might be embarrassing, but it's one of the greatest ways to craft your voice in the way you believe it should sound. Now, a lot of times, you might want to do it in different voices because you might have different ways to express yourself when you're speaking. Either way, be sure to practice singing so that you can be able to get your voice out there. One of my favorite songs is by Frank Sinatra called "Strangers in the Night." And I always practice it so I can deepen my voice. Strangers in the night. It always helps me to craft my voice. The fourth tip for crafting the perfect voice is what I like to call breaking your voice. Now, a lot of performing artists like to do this. And whether they're a comedian or a public speaker or a singer or an actor, they go out into the woods or somewhere that no one can hear them and they yell at the top of their lungs so that they can break their voice and eventually find their own unique voice. I personally went out and broke my voice many years ago. I remember those days when I would go out for an hour into the woods and it was kind of lonely, but I would practice at least 10 times to yell the loudest and longest possible so I can break my voice. And that's how I personally found my voice. Whenever you get the moment, find a secret place where you can go and yell as loud as possible. It might seem like a crazy idea, but I promise you that if you try it a couple times, it will help you to instantly improve your voice. The fifth way to craft the perfect voice is to read out loud. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this, but the way I love to do it is to just pick up a book, usually a book that's hard to read, and start reading out loud. You know, a lot of books are available, but if you pick up like a book on science or the Bible or a book by Shakespeare, I promise you that if you try this, eventually you'll be able to crack your voice. You'll be able to break through in your voice, and you'll be able to hit sounds you never hit before. A lot of times people can speak very articulately, but when it comes to reading out loud, they can't necessarily do it. Or there's a lot of people that can read out loud, but when it comes to articulating their voice, they can't do it. So make sure you're able to match up those two skills so that you can be able to practice the perfect voice. The sixth tip for crafting the perfect voice is to practice. This might seem obvious, but a lot of people are going to skip this because they don't believe that their voice can get any better than it sounds. But the fact is that it can. And I personally did this through practicing public speaking and giving well over 1,000 speeches. The best way to go about it is to join a local Toastmaster group so you can practice some speeches. If you practice your speeches, you're able to capture what you're really saying, but more importantly, how you're saying it. The inflection and the tone and the mannerisms in which you speak, all of them will help you to understand your voice. There's amazing ways that you can test yourself. A lot of times I like to practice different accents. I like to try a British accent or an Indian accent or any kind of accent that I believe that I could master, and it actually helps me to speak better. Now, I'm not making fun of any of these people when I practice these accents, but it helps me to understand my own unique voice, which is something that allows me to speak to you today. Another way you can test yourself is to ask yourself a certain question or repeat a certain phrase many different times in different ways. So for instance, you can say, "How are you doing?" 10 different ways and you can get different results. How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? You can keep trying and trying and trying, and eventually you'll be able to say how you doing in so many different ways. Another way I practice speaking personally is to practice my emotions while I speak. So if I'm trying to be humorous, I want to make sure that I'm laughing as I'm talking. Or if I'm trying to be serious, I'm trying to make sure that I keep a perfect face straight as I speak. You could practice all kinds of emotions, and eventually it will come out when you practice your perfect voice. The final tip for crafting the perfect voice is to study the greats. There's so many different people that came before us that have utilized their voice to its maximum potential. And if we studied them, we can learn a lot about how our own voice operates. A lot of times I'm amazed by how people use their voices. When I listen to broadcasters or politicians or public speakers or singers or actors or comedians and how they use their voice, I usually am captivated, and it helps me to use my own voice in a better way. Now, males and females have their own separate voices. Some of my favorite male voices are people like Paul Harvey or Earl Nightingale or Billy Graham. And some of my favorite female voices are Oprah or Audrey Hepburn or even Hillary Clinton. Whatever it is, make sure you study the voices that you like and try to carry on some of those characteristics in your own voice. In summary, this video has given you a lot of tips on what you can do to craft the perfect voice. So listen to it carefully and make sure you understand it so that you can craft your perfect voice.